You ever get that feeling that something's watching you, even when you're supposed to be completely alone? Tonight, I'm sharing 8 true night shift horror stories from inside Walmart. Real encounters that left people frozen with fear and questioning what's really out there in the dark. Each story is packed with tension, unsettling moments, and those quiet, creeping chills that stay with you long after you've heard them. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of these terrifying tales. Give this video a like if you love true horror, and share it with anyone brave enough to handle the night shift, and drop a comment down below telling me if you've ever had something weird happen when you were alone at work. I love reading your experiences. All right, turn the lights down, settle in, and let's get into these stories that prove sometimes the quietest shifts are the scariest. I took the night shift at Walmart because it paid a little more than days and because I like the quiet. Our store sat off a 2-lane highway that cut through a stretch of Appalachian foothills, the kind of place where the mountains don't rise dramatic and sharp, but hunch low and dark, tree-covered and watching. At night, when traffic died down, it felt like the store was the only thing awake for miles. Most shifts blurred together, mopping aisles that never seemed to stay clean, pulling forward merchandise, listening to the low hum of freezers and the distant whine of insects outside the automatic doors. You start to feel detached after a while, like time doesn't move the same way it does during the day. That night started no different. The doors were locked by 11, lights dimmed to overnight mode, and the few of us on shift settled into our routines. Around 1 in the morning, my radio crackled and a supervisor asked me to grab carts from the garden center lot. I didn't argue. The garden center always felt a little off, even during the day, fenced in and half forgotten, but it was usually quick work. I grabbed my vest tighter around me and pushed through the side exit. Outside, the air felt heavier than it should have. Warm and damp, carrying the smell of wet dirt and pine from the tree line beyond the parking lot. The overhead lamps buzzed and flickered, throwing uneven pools of yellow light across cracked asphalt. The rest of the lot was empty, stretching out into darkness, with the mountains looming somewhere beyond where the lights stopped reaching. I started gathering carts, the metal clanging echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. That's when I noticed someone standing near the fence at the far edge of the garden center. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow lining up just right with the wire mesh. But as I straightened up, I realized it was a person. They were standing completely still, just beyond the fence, half in shadow. No phone, no cigarette, no movement at all. I told myself it was probably a customer who'd wandered too far before closing, or maybe someone waiting for a ride. Still, something about the way they stood, too rigid, too patient, made my stomach tighten. I pushed a line of carts toward the corral and glanced back. The figure hadn't moved, but I could feel their attention on me, heavy and deliberate. I raised my radio and called inside, asking if anyone else was outside. All I got back was static, loud and sharp in my ear. I tried again, slower this time, and again there was nothing but crackling noise. I lowered the radio and felt suddenly exposed, like the fence and lights weren't really separating me from whatever was out there. When I looked back toward the fence, the figure had moved. They were closer now, standing just a few steps away from where the fence bent toward the lot. They hadn't crossed it, but they were close enough that I could make out a shape. Tall, thin, dressed in something dark that blended into the night. I couldn't see their face clearly, only the suggestion of a head tilted slightly, like they were studying me. I started pushing the carts faster, metal wheels rattling over the uneven ground. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could hear it over the buzzing lights. As I moved, the figure began to move too, circling along the fence line, keeping pace with me. Not rushing, not hiding, just matching my speed, always staying just beyond the barrier. I told myself fences are there for a reason, that they couldn't get to me, but the thought rang hollow. Out here, at this hour, help felt very far away. I dropped the carts halfway to the corral and turned toward the garden center doors. I didn't look back, but I knew they were still there. I could feel it, like a pressure between my shoulder blades. My boots slapped against the concrete as I ran, fumbling with the key when I reached the door. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it once. In that moment, I was sure I was about to feel a hand on my back, fingers digging in, pulling me away from the door. But the lock finally turned, and I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I locked it, checked it twice, then killed the lights. The garden center went dark, lit only by faint glow bleeding in from the main store. I crouched down behind a stack of mulch and soil bags, pressing myself as low as I could, trying to quiet my breathing. The silence inside felt thick, broken only by the distant hum of the store and the ringing in my ears. That's when I heard the tapping. It started soft, almost polite. Fingertips against glass. Tap, tap, tap. Slow and deliberate. I didn't have to see it to know where it was coming from, the glass doors I'd just run through. The tapping moved, sliding across the surface, pausing, then starting again, like whoever was outside was testing the glass, listening for a reaction. I bit down on my sleeve to keep from making a sound. Every nerve in my body was screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. Minutes stretched out, each one heavier than the last. The tapping stopped and started again, sometimes higher up on the glass than felt possible, sometimes low and slow, like knuckles dragging. At one point, I thought I heard breathing, faint but close, muffled by the door. My radio buzzed once at my hip, sudden and loud enough to make me flinch, then went dead again. Eventually, the tapping stopped altogether. I didn't move. I stayed crouched there, muscles aching, until the sky outside the frosted windows began to lighten. Dawn crept in slowly, the darkness thinning just enough for shapes to take form again. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak, like they might give out under me. I turned the lights back on and approached the door. In the early morning light, I saw them, muddy handprints smeared across the glass. Too many to count. Some were low, like someone crouching. Others were high, far higher than my own reach, fingers stretched wide. They overlapped and layered over each other, as if more than one person had been there, or one person moving in ways that didn't make sense. The mud was dark and wet, streaked downward, like hands sliding slowly as they pressed. I reported it, of course. Management called the police. They walked the perimeter, shined flashlights into the tree line, shrugged. No footprints leading away, no sign of forced entry. They told me it was probably kids messing around, maybe someone passing through. I nodded along, but I knew better. Kids don't stand that still. Kids don't tap like that. I finished out my shift, but something had shifted. The store felt different now, like the walls were thinner, the lights weaker. I quit not long after that. Even now, years later, when I drive past that stretch of the highway at night, I catch myself glancing toward the edge of the light, half expecting to see someone standing there, just beyond where it's safe to look. And sometimes, when it's quiet enough, I swear I can still hear that tapping, slow and patient, waiting for me to notice again. Working nights meant the store stopped feeling like a place people shopped and started feeling like something else entirely. Once the doors locked and the last customers filtered out, Walmart turned into a hollow maze of aisles and shadows. The lights dimmed automatically after midnight, leaving long stretches of shelving half-lit, corners swallowed by darkness. Refrigerators hummed constantly, a low mechanical breathing that never stopped, and every sound you made came back to you a second later, stretched and distorted by the emptiness. After a few months on overnights, you learned to live with it. Or at least, you thought you did. That shift started slow and quiet, the way I preferred. I was zoning groceries, pulling cans forward, fixing labels, letting my mind drift while my hands worked on autopilot. Around 2 in the morning, the store felt especially still. No forklifts running, no radios chirping, just me and the endless rows of food. I remember thinking how easy it would be to get lost in there if the lights went out completely, how every aisle looked the same when you were tired enough. I was halfway down the canned vegetables aisle when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I didn't react. Overnight crews are small, but you cross paths sometimes. What caught my attention was the rhythm. Slow, deliberate steps, spaced evenly apart. They stopped when I stopped. I took another step forward, pretending not to care, and the sound followed, matching me perfectly. I turned around, expecting to see someone pushing a cart or carrying a box. The aisle was empty. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the lights and the faint whine of the freezers at the far end of the store. I told myself it was my imagination, that exhaustion was getting to me. I turned back to the shelf and started working again. The footsteps came back almost immediately. This time I felt them more than I heard them, a presence pressing in from behind. I called out, keeping my voice casual, asking who was there. My words echoed down the aisle and died without an answer. I tried again, louder. Still nothing. I radioed management, asking if anyone else was working groceries. They told me no. That side of the store was mine alone. The footsteps followed me as I moved on, staying just out of sight. Canned goods gave way to baking supplies, then condiments. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I moved, they moved. Never closer. Never farther away. It felt intentional, like whatever was back there knew exactly how far to stay. By the time I reached frozen foods, my nerves were shot. The temperature dropped as soon as I stepped into the aisle, cold air spilling out from the freezers. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. The sound of footsteps carried strangely here, sharper against the concrete floor, and when they echoed back, it felt like the sound was coming from all directions at once. I ducked into the security office near the back, telling myself I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The monitor bank glowed softly in the dark room, showing grainy black and white feeds from around the store. I leaned in, scanning aisle after aisle. Empty, empty, empty. Then I saw my own aisle. I stood there on the screen, a small figure framed by towering shelves. Behind me, just at the edge of the camera's range, something moved. Not a person exactly, more like a shadow pulling itself together, edges blurring and reforming. It flickered for a second, then vanished. I rewound the feed and watched again. Same thing, a dark blur, always behind me, never fully resolving into a shape. My hands were shaking when I shut off my scanner. I didn't run, not yet, but I walked faster, heading for the personnel office near the front. The footsteps followed, quickening to match my pace. Each step landed at the same time as mine, close enough now that I could feel the vibration through the floor. I broke into a jog. So did it. By the time I reached the office, my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, backing into a corner as the footsteps stopped just outside. The sudden silence was worse than the sound had been. I could feel something there, inches away, separated from me by nothing but a hollow door. Minutes passed, then hours. I sat on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest, listening. Sometimes I thought I heard weight shifting, fabric brushing against wood. Once, I swear I heard breathing, shallow and patient. The handle rattled once, just enough to make me gasp, then went still again. I stayed there until the first hint of morning crept through the office window. When the day crew arrived and the store came back to life, the feeling lifted, like pressure easing off my chest. I unlocked the door and stepped out into a normal-looking Walmart, bright and busy, like nothing had happened. But sometimes, when I work late elsewhere now, I still catch myself matching my steps to someone who isn't there, and every time I stop, part of me waits, terrified, to see if the footsteps stop too. The loading dock was always the part of the store everyone avoided after dark. No cameras, just a few flickering floodlights bolted to the brick, and the constant smell of diesel soaked into the concrete from decades of trucks coming and going. During the day, it was loud and busy, forklifts whining and people shouting over each other. At night, it felt abandoned, like a place the rest of the store pretended didn't exist. Sounds carried strangely back there, bouncing off metal doors and empty trailers, and once you stepped outside the glow of the interior lights, it felt like you'd crossed into something separate. That night, I was breaking down pallets alone. Management was short-staffed, and I drew the short straw. Cardboard stacked around me in leaning towers, shrink wrap clinging to my hands. The rhythmic scrape of a box cutter, the only thing breaking the silence. The bay door was open just enough to let in air, and beyond it was the parking lot, mostly dark, fading into a tree line that marked where the land dropped toward the hills. Every so often, a truck would pass on the highway, its headlights sweeping briefly across the dock before disappearing again. I noticed him when I paused to stretch my back. At first, I thought he was a shadow cast by one of the trailers, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. He was standing right at the edge of the dock, just before the concrete dropped away into darkness. Tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes that blended into the night. His back was to me, head angled slightly downward, staring into the lot like he was watching something I couldn't see. I cleared my throat and called out, asking if he needed help. My voice echoed louder than I expected, bouncing off the metal walls. He didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't shift his weight. I tried again, louder, irritation creeping in to mask the unease. Still nothing. No acknowledgement at all, like he hadn't heard me, or like he'd heard me and decided I wasn't worth responding to. I took a step closer, then stopped. Something about the stillness felt wrong. People move, even when they're trying not to. They breathe, they sway. This man looked planted, like part of the dock itself. I told myself it was probably someone from a delivery truck, maybe tired or drunk, zoning out. But the longer I stood there, the more my skin prickled, like I was being watched from more than one direction. I asked him one more time to step away from the edge. That's when he turned. It was slow, deliberate, as if he'd been saving the movement. His face came into the light just enough for me to see it clearly, and my stomach dropped. He was smiling, not wide or exaggerated, just a thin, knowing smile that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were open too wide, fixed on me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. It wasn't a friendly smile, or even a threatening one. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they've been waiting for something to finally happen. I backed away without thinking, every instinct screaming at me to put distance between us. I told him the dock was closed, that he needed to leave. My words felt weak as soon as they left my mouth. He didn't answer. He just stood there, smiling, watching me retreat. I turned and ran. The moment I crossed back into the building, the noise of my footsteps seemed deafening. I slammed the dock door shut behind me and threw the heavy lock, hands shaking so badly it took me 2 tries. I pressed my back against the cold metal, chest heaving, waiting to hear something. Footsteps, shouting, anything. What I got instead was impact. Something heavy slammed into the door from the other side, hard enough to make the metal shudder. The sound echoed through the dock, deep and violent. I stumbled away as another hit followed, then another. Each blow bowed the door inward, the frame groaning under the force. Whatever was hitting it wasn't testing, it was trying to get through. I yelled for help, my voice cracking as I radioed management. Static answered at first, then a garbled reply telling me to stay put and that they were calling the police. The impacts kept coming, uneven now, like fists or shoulders or something heavier being thrown against the door. With each hit, dust shook loose from the ceiling. I backed into a corner between pallets, clutching my radio like it could protect me. I could hear breathing through the door, low, ragged, close. At one point, I swear I heard a laugh, muffled by the steel, short and sharp, like he found the whole thing amusing. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the door to give way, for the lock to snap, for him to come through smiling. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. My ears rang, and my heart felt like it was going to tear its way out of my chest. I stayed where I was, frozen, listening for any sign of movement. Minutes passed, then more. I didn't move until I heard voices on the other side of the building and the distant wail of sirens approaching. The police arrived quickly, lights flashing against the dock walls. They unlocked the door cautiously and swung it open, weapons drawn. The lot beyond was empty. No man, no movement, just the dark stretch of asphalt and the tree line beyond it, unmoving and quiet. They examined the door next. Deep dents marred the metal, warped inward in several places, paint chipped away to bare steel. Along the concrete outside, scrape marks led away from the dock, long and uneven, like something heavy had been dragged, or had dragged itself, back toward the darkness. The officers exchanged looks but didn't say much. One of them asked me to describe the man again, writing it down carefully, nodding without comment. They searched the area, shining flashlights into the trees, calling out. Nothing answered. No footprints. No sign of anyone hiding. Eventually, they told me there was nothing more they could do. I finished my shift in a fog. The dock stayed closed, taped off until maintenance could look at the door. Daylight made everything look smaller, less threatening, but the dents were still there, undeniable. Proof that something had happened, even if no one could explain it. I quit not long after that. Even now, years later, the smell of diesel makes my chest tighten. Sometimes, when I'm near a loading dock at night, I find myself scanning the edges of the light, half expecting to see a man standing perfectly still, staring into the dark, waiting for me to notice him again. I was assigned the final closing announcement because I had the clearest voice and knew how to work the old PA system without it squealing. By the time the task fell to me, the store was already empty. The last customers had left nearly 20 minutes earlier, and the automatic doors were locked, their sensors dark. Overnight mode had kicked in, dimming the lights so that the aisles stretched out long and shadowed, shelves fading into gray at the edges. Walmart at that hour didn't feel abandoned so much as paused, like it was holding its breath. The PA room sat just off the main office, a cramped space with a desk, a microphone mounted on a flexible arm, and a speaker that hummed faintly even when it wasn't in use. I shut the door behind me and picked up the mic, glancing at the monitor that showed the store map lighting up as the announcement system came online. My voice echoed softly through the speakers overhead as I did a quick test. Everything sounded normal. I took a breath and began the announcement, the same words I'd said 100 times before. As my voice carried out into the empty store, it came back to me a half-second later through the walls, faint and distorted, bouncing down the aisles. That echo was always there. I was used to it. What I wasn't used to was the whisper underneath it. At first, I thought it was feedback, some glitch in the system, But as I kept talking, I realized it wasn't random noise. It was words, my words. The whisper followed each sentence I spoke, repeating it just a beat behind me, quieter but unmistakably clear. It sounded like someone leaning close to a microphone somewhere else in the store, mimicking me under their breath. I froze mid-sentence. The echo of my last word faded, and then the whisper finished it. My grip tightened on the microphone. I stood there, staring at the speaker mounted on the wall, heart starting to thud in my chest. I laughed nervously and told myself it had to be another employee messing with a radio. Maybe someone keyed in at the wrong time. I asked over the PA if anyone was on the floor. The whisper repeated the question back to me. It was closer now, louder. The delay between my voice and the whisper had shortened, like it was catching up. I swallowed and tried to end the announcement quickly, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. As I spoke faster, so did the whisper, matching my pace, copying my tone. I could hear the faintest distortion in it, like it was being pushed through damaged speakers or coming from somewhere far too close to the mic. I slammed my hand down on the control panel and shut the system off. The hum died. The speakers went silent. I stood there in the sudden quiet, listening to my own breathing. The silence stretched on, heavy and absolute. For a moment, I felt ridiculous, embarrassed by how hard my heart was pounding. I reached for the door, ready to laugh it off and tell myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Then the speakers crackled back to life. My voice filled the room again, calm and clear, announcing that the store was now closed and thanking customers for shopping with us. I hadn't touched the controls. The system monitor was dark, powered down. The microphone lay untouched on the desk. The announcement played anyway. I backed away from the desk, a cold wave rolling through my stomach. My recorded voice continued on, word for word, perfect in every detail. When it reached the end, it didn't stop. It started again from the beginning, looping, filling the store with a message meant for no one. I ran. I burst out of the PA room and sprinted down the hallway to the main office, the sound of my own voice chasing me through the ceiling speakers. The aisles outside were empty, but the announcement made it feel like I was being followed, my words echoing above me wherever I went. I locked myself into the personnel office and shoved a chair under the handle, chest heaving as I slid down against the wall. From inside that small room, I could still hear it. "Attention, Walmart shoppers." The voice was slightly wrong now. The timing was off, stretching words, dragging certain syllables just a fraction too long. Between repetitions, I could hear faint distortions, like breath brushing against a microphone or lips parting. The message kept playing even after the scheduled cycle should have ended. I called management on my phone, whispering even though I was alone. They told me the PA system showed offline on their end. They said they didn't hear anything from their side of the store. I asked them to come get me. They told me to stay put. The announcement continued for hours. Sometimes it played clean and normal. Other times it overlapped with itself. My voice layering on top of my voice, slightly out of sync. Once, I was certain I heard something added at the end of a sentence. A low sound that wasn't part of the script, like a soft exhale or a quiet laugh. I didn't sleep. I sat there until the sky outside the small office window began to lighten, fingers pressed into my ears, feeling the vibrations of the speakers through the walls more than hearing them. When the morning crew arrived and the store lights snapped back to full brightness, the announcement finally cut off mid-sentence. No one could explain it. Maintenance checked the system and found nothing wrong. No logs, no recordings. According to them, the PA had never turned back on after I shut it down. But sometimes, even now, when I hear my own voice echo in a large, empty space, I get the sickening feeling that it's not alone anymore, that something learned it, and that somewhere, in a quiet place meant to be empty, it's still practicing what to say when someone listens again. During my breaks, I never stayed inside. The break room felt claustrophobic at night. Too many humming machines, too many half-asleep co-workers staring at their phones in silence. I preferred my car. I'd grab my jacket, step out through the side doors, and sit in the driver's seat with the engine running, heater on low, radio barely audible. From there, I could see most of the parking lot, washed in yellow light and surrounded by darkness, where the pavement gave way to trees and empty road. That night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeps in through the seams of your clothes. I parked under one of the lights, letting the warmth build while I scrolled aimlessly on my phone. The lot was empty, as it always was at that hour. No cars, no movement. Just the faint buzz of the light above me and the distant sound of traffic miles away. That's when I noticed someone standing several rows out, directly beneath another light pole. They were facing me. At first, I assumed it was another employee on break, maybe someone new I didn't recognize. But something felt off immediately. They weren't smoking, weren't on their phone. Just standing there, arms at their sides, head lifted slightly, staring straight at my car. I remember thinking how odd it was that I hadn't noticed them walking out. The doors would have made a sound. The lights would have shifted. I looked down at my phone, telling myself not to be weird about it. Maybe they'd move in a second. Maybe I'd look back up and laugh at myself. When I looked up again, they were closer. Not by much, maybe a few parking spaces, but close enough that my stomach tightened. I could see more detail now. Dark clothes, thin build, their face still caught in shadow despite the light overhead. I glanced toward the store doors, debating whether to go back inside, then told myself I was overreacting. I blinked. They were closer again. This time, there was no mistaking it. They hadn't walked. They hadn't shifted naturally. It was like they'd simply appeared several feet nearer while my eyes were closed. My pulse picked up, thudding in my ears. I stared hard, refusing to look away, afraid of what might happen if I did. They didn't move while I watched. I blinked again by accident, a quick reflex I couldn't stop. They were halfway down the row now. I felt a wave of cold wash through me that had nothing to do with the weather. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The figure's head tilted slightly, just enough to suggest curiosity, like they were gauging how fast I might run. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I threw the car into park, yanked the door open, and ran. The cold air burned my lungs as I sprinted back toward the store. I didn't look behind me. I couldn't. I could feel something moving, could sense distance closing even without hearing footsteps. I slammed through the doors, bolted down the hallway and locked myself inside the break room, pushing a table against the door for good measure. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor. After a few minutes, when my breathing slowed enough to think, I realized my car was still out there. Running. Door unlocked. The thought made my chest tighten. I crept to the security monitor mounted in the break room corner and flipped it on, cycling through camera feeds until I found the parking lot. My car sat exactly where I'd left it, headlights glowing weakly. Beside it stood the figure. They were right up against the driver's side door, close enough that their shoulder nearly touched the window. On the grainy black and white feed, I watched them lean in slightly, head tilting the same way it had before, ear angled toward the glass, listening, as if they could hear my breathing from inside the store, as if they knew exactly where I was hiding. They stayed like that for a long time. Minutes passed, then more. They didn't try the door, didn't look around, just stood there, unmoving, pressed close to my car. Once, they lifted a hand and rested it flat against the window. The camera couldn't capture detail, but I imagined the sound it would have made if I'd still been inside. A soft, deliberate tap. Eventually, another employee walked outside on their break. The moment the doors opened and light spilled across the lot, the figure was gone. Not walking away, not retreating into the darkness, just gone. One frame they were there, the next empty space. No one believed me. They said it was probably a trick of the cameras, or exhaustion, or someone messing around. But when I went back to my car at the end of the shift, the driver's side window was fogged over from the inside as if someone had leaned close enough to breathe against it. I don't take breaks in my car anymore. Sometimes, when I'm parked somewhere late at night and I glance up from my phone, I feel that same spike of fear, like something's already closer than it should be, just waiting for me to blink again. Receiving was never a place you lingered, especially at night. During the day it was loud and chaotic, forklifts weaving through narrow lanes, radios squawking, metal doors slamming open and shut. After midnight, it turned into something else entirely. The lights were usually kept off unless someone was actively working back there, leaving the space swallowed in darkness, broken only by thin lines of light slipping in from under closed bay doors. The air always smelled like cardboard, dust, oil, and old wood, a scent that clung to your clothes long after you left. I was sent back there alone to grab shrink wrap and a pallet jack. It should have taken less than a minute. I remember hesitating at the threshold, hand on the light switch, debating whether to turn it on. Something about that night made me feel rushed, like I needed to get in and out quickly. I told myself I was being stupid, stepped inside, and reached for the supplies, stacked just a few feet in. The door slammed shut behind me. It wasn't a gentle swing or a slow close. It was violent, loud enough to echo through the cavernous room. The sound startled me so badly I jumped, my heart slamming into my ribs. The faint light vanished instantly, plunging the room into complete darkness. I spun around, calling out, thinking maybe someone else had come in behind me. No answer. Before I could take a step, I heard it. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Wet in a way that made my skin crawl. It didn't sound like someone out of breath or struggling. It sounded steady, controlled, like whatever was making it didn't need air the way I did. Each inhale dragged on too long. Each exhale ended with a low, vibrating sound that carried through the floor. I froze where I stood, afraid that even the smallest movement would give me away. My eyes strained uselessly against the darkness. I couldn't see my own hands in front of my face. The breathing wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. It came from somewhere deeper in receiving, near the stacked pallets and idle equipment. I moved slowly, inch by inch, feeling my way forward until my fingers brushed against shrink-wrapped boxes. I crouched down and slipped behind a stack of pallets, pressing myself flat against the cold concrete floor. The smell of wood and dust filled my nose. I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to keep my breathing quiet, trying not to panic. Something moved. There was a scraping sound, low and deliberate, like weight being dragged across the floor. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't searching blindly. It moved with purpose, slow circles, the scrape stopping and starting as if it were testing the space. The breathing followed it, growing louder, then softer, shifting direction in ways that made it impossible to pinpoint exactly where it was. Time stretched. My legs began to cramp, but I didn't dare move. Every instinct told me that whatever was in that room knew exactly where I was hiding and simply hadn't decided what to do yet. The scrape came closer, the sound of something heavy brushing against pallets just a few feet away. I squeezed my eyes shut, silently begging for someone to open the door, for a radio to crackle. for anything to break the silence. The breathing stopped right in front of me. I felt it then. Not a touch, but a presence, dense and suffocating, like the air itself had thickened. The floor vibrated faintly beneath me, as if something massive had settled its weight nearby. I could smell it now too, a sour, metallic odor layered over the dust and oil. My heart pounded so hard, I was sure it could be heard. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Seconds felt like hours. Then, somewhere beyond the pallets, I heard the unmistakable click of a door handle. Light spilled into the room as the receiving door opened. The breathing stopped instantly. No fading, no retreating footsteps, just silence, sudden and absolute, like a switch had been flipped. I stayed frozen, listening, waiting for the scraping to start again. It didn't. I heard a co-worker's voice calling my name, irritated, asking why I was taking so long. When I finally crawled out from behind the pallets, my legs barely held me. The room was empty. No forklifts running, no equipment out of place. Just the same stacks of pallets and boxes, exactly as they should have been. My co-worker frowned at me, asked if I'd fallen asleep back there or something. I tried to explain, stumbling over my words, pointing toward where I'd hidden. They laughed it off, told me the door must have slammed because of pressure from the bay doors. Said the noises were probably pipes or the building settling. They didn't see the way my hands were shaking, or if they did, they didn't comment. I finished my shift in a daze. After that night, I avoided receiving whenever I could. If I had to go back there, I made sure the lights were on and someone else was with me. Even then, sometimes I'd catch a smell that didn't belong, or hear a faint scrape when no one was moving. What haunts me the most isn't the breathing itself. It's how quickly it stopped, like whatever was in that darkness didn't flee when the door opened, like it simply knew when it was no longer alone and chose not to be heard anymore. I drew the short straw that night and got assigned restroom checks. It was one of those tasks nobody wanted after midnight, especially the men's room near the back of the store, tucked between seasonal storage and the emergency exit. During the day it was busy and loud, but at night it felt sealed off from the rest of the building. The lights were dimmer there, the air colder, carrying a constant damp smell that never quite went away no matter how much you cleaned. I pushed the cart in with gloves already on, mop bucket sloshing softly. As soon as I stepped inside, the door swung shut behind me with a hollow thud. The sound echoed off the tile, sharper than it should have been. I remember pausing, listening, because something about the room felt wrong, too quiet, like the noise from the rest of the store had been swallowed whole. I'd barely taken 2 steps when I heard it. A stall door creaking open. It was slow and deliberate, the metal hinge protesting softly as it moved. I stopped and called out, my voice coming out steadier than I felt, asking if anyone was in there. My words bounced off the walls and died without an answer. I waited, expecting a cough or the shuffle of shoes, anything that would explain the sound. Nothing. I walked farther in, heart starting to beat harder. The row of stalls stretched along the wall, all of them open, empty, clean enough for a late shift. I checked each one in order, telling myself I'd imagined the noise. When I reached the last stall, I stopped. Muddy footprints marked the tile floor. They started just outside the stall entrance and led inside, dark and wet, toes clearly defined. I stared at them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It had been dry outside all night. No rain, no mud tracked in anywhere else. The prints went into the stall and didn't come back out. I leaned closer, scanning the floor, my pulse thudding in my ears. Inside the stall, there were no shoes, no legs beneath the divider, nothing. Just the footprints stopping abruptly in front of the toilet like whoever made them had simply vanished. A chill ran up my spine. I backed away slowly, eyes never leaving that stall. As I did, I heard water start running behind me. I spun around just in time to see one of the sinks turn on by itself, the handle twisting as if an invisible hand had grabbed it. The sound of rushing water filled the room, loud and intrusive, echoing off the tile. Then the mirror began to fog. At first, it was just a thin haze creeping across the glass, like someone had taken a hot shower nearby. Within seconds, the entire mirror was clouded over, the reflection of the room disappearing behind a milky blur. I stood frozen, mop handle clenched in my hands, unable to look away. Something touched the mirror from the other side. Fingerprints appeared one by one, pressing into the fog. They were long, stretched slightly, as if whoever made them was leaning their weight forward. Slowly, deliberately, the prints began to slide downward, leaving clear streaks in their wake. I could almost hear the faint squeak of skin against glass, imagined the pressure behind it. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my cart. My chest felt tight, breath coming shallow and fast. The sink kept running, water splashing into the basin, overflowing onto the floor. The footprints in the stall remained, dark and unmoving, like they were watching me. I ran. I burst out of the restroom and didn't stop until I reached the main aisle, the bright lights and distant hum of activity hitting me all at once. I leaned against a shelf, gasping, trying to convince myself I'd just had some kind of stress-induced hallucination. When I finally worked up the nerve to radio it in, my voice cracked as I asked for someone to come check the men's room with me. 2 co-workers came back with me a few minutes later. The restroom was normal. The sink was off. The floor was dry. The mirror was clear and spotless. No fog, no fingerprints. The stall floor was clean. No trace of mud anywhere. They exchanged looks, then glanced at me, eyebrows raised. One of them joked that I'd been watching too many scary videos online. The other asked if I needed to sit down. I couldn't explain it. I didn't even try after that. I finished my shift on edge, jumping at every unexpected sound. Before leaving, I checked the restroom one last time from the doorway. It looked harmless, ordinary, exactly the way it was supposed to, but as I turned away, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, dark shapes on the tile near the stalls. I didn't look back. Even now, whenever I walk into a public restroom late at night and hear the faint creak of a stall door, my stomach tightens. I find myself scanning the floor first, dreading what I might see leading in, and hoping I never have to find out where it goes. Near the end of my shift, the store always settled into a strange calm. It was that dead hour before morning crew arrived, when your body was exhausted, but your mind refused to shut down. The lights were dim, the aisles empty, and the building felt hollow, like a shell waiting to be filled again. I was in the cash office counting down drawers, the steady rhythm of bills and coins helping keep me awake. Outside, beyond the thick concrete walls, the world felt very far away. That calm shattered all at once. Every exterior motion alarm triggered simultaneously. The sound hit the building like a siren chorus, sharp beeps layered over each other, lights flashing on the security panel. I froze, hands hovering over an open cash drawer. In my years working nights, I'd never seen that happen. One alarm, maybe 2, usually caused by a raccoon or a delivery truck passing too close. But all of them, front entrance, garden center, receiving bays, emergency exits, every perimeter sensor screaming at once. I rushed to the security monitors. The camera feeds flickered as they switched to alert mode. What I saw made my stomach drop. Shadows moved along the outer walls of the building, dark, uneven shapes sliding just beyond the reach of the floodlights. They circled slowly, deliberately, never stepping fully into the light. When one drifted close to a lamp, it thinned and stretched, clinging to the edge of brightness before pulling back into darkness again. There were too many to count. They didn't move like people. There was no rhythm to them, no clear direction, just constant motion like water flowing around a rock. I radioed management immediately, my voice tight. They answered right away, already aware of the alarms. I asked if police were on the way. There was a pause on the line, longer than I liked. Then they told me to stay put. Lock myself in the cash office. Do not open any doors for any reason. That was all they said. I did exactly what I was told. I shut the heavy steel door, threw the deadbolt, and slid a filing cabinet in front of it for good measure. The cash office was small and windowless, lined with safes and counting tables. The air felt stale, thick with the smell of paper and metal. I turned off the main light and left only the monitor glow, crouching behind the desk with my phone clenched in my hand. That's when the rattling started. It came from everywhere at once. Doors shaking in their frames, metal handles clanging, emergency exits thudding like something was testing them from the outside. The alarms wailed non-stop, echoing through the building, blending into a single, unbearable sound. On the monitors, the shadows moved faster now, clustering near entrances, stretching up along the walls before slipping back down. I watched one of the receiving doors bow inward slightly, then snap back. Another camera showed the garden center gates shuddering, wire mesh vibrating as if pressed from the other side. Still, nothing stepped fully into view. No faces, no bodies, just shifting darkness and the suggestion of weight behind it. My phone buzzed with a text from management telling me again to stay put. Police were checking the area. That phrase meant nothing to me in that moment. All I could think about was how thin the doors suddenly felt, how fragile the building seemed when everything outside wanted in. Something slammed hard against the front entrance. The sound boomed through the store, deep and resonant, felt more than heard. The alarms spiked louder, lights flickering overhead. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting the urge to scream. The slam came again, then another, each impact followed by the scrape of something dragging across metal and glass. On the monitor, the shadows thickened around the doors, pooling there, writhing just out of reach of the camera's clarity. Then the cash office door rattled. It wasn't a heavy impact at first, just a testing shake, like hands on the handle, feeling for weakness. I held my breath, heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. The handle twisted once, then again, harder this time. The filing cabinet shuddered as the door flexed in its frame. I slid down to the floor, knees pulled to my chest, covering my mouth to keep from making a sound. The rattling moved, traveling along the wall outside the office, testing other doors, other barriers. Sometimes it stopped long enough for me to hope it was over. Then it would start again somewhere else, closer, angrier. Through it all, the shadows never entered the light. Hours dragged by like that. I lost track of time, measuring it only by how often my phone vibrated with updates that said nothing. The alarms never shut off. My ears rang constantly. At one point, the rattling outside the cash office became rhythmic, methodical, like something trying every possible approach. I could hear scraping now too, a harsh, dragging sound that made my teeth ache. Then, slowly, things began to quiet. The alarms cut out one by one, plunging the store into an eerie silence. The rattling stopped. On the monitors, the shadows thinned, retreating back into the darkness beyond the floodlights. The sky on the exterior cameras lightened from black to gray. Dawn crept in, soft and harmless looking, like it erased the night just by existing. By the time police finally arrived, the building was quiet. They walked the perimeter while I stayed locked inside, watching through the monitors. No movement, no shadows, nothing out of place, at least not from a distance. When they gave the all clear, my legs barely held me as I unlocked the door and stepped out. Up close, the damage was impossible to ignore. Every exterior door bore marks, deep gouges carved into metal and wood, long and uneven. Like something with too much strength and not enough patience had tried every way inside. Some marks were high, far above where a person could reasonably reach. Others were low, clustered near the bottom, overlapping in frantic patterns. The front doors were scratched so deeply the paint had been stripped away, bare steel shining through. The officers exchanged looks but said very little. They took photos. They asked me what I'd seen. I told them about the shadows, the alarms, the way nothing ever stepped into the light. One of them nodded slowly, like he'd heard something similar before but didn't want to say it out loud. By mid-morning, the store opened like nothing had happened. Customers walked past the doors without noticing the scratches. Management told me to take the rest of the day off. I didn't come back after that. Sometimes, when I drive past big buildings late at night, I catch myself watching the edges of the lights where darkness presses closest. I think about how whatever circled that store knew exactly where the light ended, knew exactly how to stay just out of sight. And I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for another place to go quiet enough to notice.